Welcome again back to class. This is the third module focusing on the product owner role. In the last two modules, we laid the foundation from Scrum, looking at what Scrum is and the fundamentals of Scrum. Scrum as a framework on its own. And in some of this, we mentioned and discussed the roles in Scrum, the events in Scrum, the artifacts in Scrum, and we also mentioned about the empiricism of Scrum. That was in the first module. What Scrum is, the origin of Scrum, the how Scrum delivers value, the empiricism of Scrum, the value of Scrum, and all the rest. So in this third module, which is dedicated to the product owner role, we would be expanding on some of those things we mentioned in module 2 as regards the product owner. So in module 3 we would focus on the essential role of the product owner. What are the duties of the product owner? What makes a product owner stand out? And how can we identify clearly what the product owner does in a Scrum team? So let's jump right into it. And we shall start from who is a product owner? Who is a product owner? Laying the foundation. Of course, I believe we have idea while we went through the three roles in Scrum. We know now that the product owner owns the product, which means the product owner in actual sense represents the stakeholders that own the product. There are a lot of things we'll be sharing, we'll be discussing as regards the product owner in Scrum. So from the onset, I would want everyone to be attentive and to note from the beginning, focusing on the product owner role. So who is the product owner? What or who is the product owner? The product owner is a key role responsible for maximizing the value delivered by the development team. So this development team are the developers. So the product owner is a key role responsible for maximizing the value delivered by the development team. The product owner is the single individual accountable for managing the product backlog. We need to make some emphasis here. At any given time, you should know that the product owner owns the product backlog, is fully accountable for the product backlog. Whatever happens in the product backlog belongs to the product owner. He creates the product backlog, he manages the product backlog. But not just that, including prioritizing the work items and representing the interests of stakeholders to ensure that products meet customer needs and business goals. So this is who, in a nutshell, a product owner is. A product owner is the single individual accountable for managing the product backlog. We know at this time what the product backlog is. We've seen that again and again, even starting from module 1. Um, in module 2, we covered the product backlog extensively. In the product owner training, we will still look at the composition of the product owner as well. But let's note that the product owner owns the product backlog, he manages the product backlog, also he prioritizes work items in the product backlog, and of course, the other very key role of the product owner is representing the interest of the stakeholders to, and he ensures the delivery of the right product that the customer wants, that also meets the business goal. The business goal. The business goal is predefined, so development by the development team must align with the business goal. So that is who a product owner is. The product owner communicates the product vision, but not just the product vision, the roadmap. Why is this guy jumping up and down? The product vision, the roadmap. I believe we understand what the roadmap is. Wow. Can this thing be logged so it won't be jumping back and forth? Okay, so the roadmap, right, and customer requirements to align all parties towards a shared direction. It communicates the product vision, the roadmap. The product vision is the destination of that product. The roadmap is how we would arrive there. What do we do? This is what we deliver at this point. This is what we deliver at that point. That forms the roadmap. At some point while we go on in this class, we would see the board again to understand what the roadmap is. There is a particular class dedicated that we would talk about roadmap in details. So let's just note that the product owner communicates the product vision, the roadmap, and customer requirements that should align with everyone's direction, right? The product owner makes decisions regarding the product scope, the release plans, and trades off. There is a link I shared, we'll share again. It would give a broad overview of what the product owner does. Perhaps I should add that link to this particular lesson also, so we can go through that link. So there are lots of trade-offs that the product owner needs to see through. There's what we call release plan. Release plan is the agenda to deploy the product to the end users. That's the release plan. So for that product to be deployed, there is a plan that goes with it. And of course, between features, trade-off between feature based on business priorities and feedbacks from the stakeholders. So the product owner does clearly a lot of duties as regards business priorities, aligning the features to meet what business priorities are, and aligning them also to meet what requirements or feedbacks from the stakeholders are as well. Okay, let's go further. So here we'll look at the attributes of the product owner. What should a product owner carry? What should be the capacity of a product owner? Number one, effective collaboration with stakeholders and development team. So we know that the product owner serves as the communication link or the gap or the essential role between the stakeholders and the Scrum team. Of course, he is a part of the Scrum team also. That's why we make reference here to the development team. The development team makes reference to the developers, right? So the product owner must have effective collaboration skills. Those are essentially soft skills. He must or she must be able to engage with the stakeholders adequately, to have clear understanding what the stakeholder wants, and also engage with the developers to be able to communicate clearly what the stakeholder wants to the developers and ensure that the developer would deliver what the stakeholder wants. So the product owner must have effective communication and collaboration skills. Effective communication and collaboration skills. Secondly, um, but before secondly, the product owner also, in module 2 we mentioned that the product owner is fully committed to the stakeholders and is also fully committed to the developers, ensuring that there are no gaps between both the stakeholders and the development team. Number 2, the product owner must have undivided focus on the product's goal. For every product, there is expected to be a product goal. That is the ultimate thing that needs to be delivered, the product goal. So the product owner, right, should have undivided attention and focus, concentration on the product goal or towards the product goal. It's very important that the product owner must have clear understanding what the stakeholders want. It is when the product owner has clear understanding what the stakeholder wants that is able to communicate same to the developers, is able to communicate and work with the Scrum team, that's including the Scrum Master. Number 3, the stakeholder, the product owner should have capacity to manage changing requirements. In production or in projects, products or projects, and in agile collaboration, because we've mentioned a couple of times that agile is big on customer collaboration. In the process of collaborating with the customers, there would be need for changes. Requirements would be changing. Sometimes scope could also slightly change. But when those requirements are changing, the product owner must be able to manage those changes. And that is why in module 2 we mentioned that in Agile we have adaptive product backlog. Because the product backlog is adaptive, it's able to adjust to those changes. So when changes are coming from time to time, the product owner must be able to manage those changes and reflect same on the communication, the user stories, the work items, everything that needs to be delivered. The product owner must be adaptive to those changes. One of the manifestos of Agile talks about responding to change rather than following a plan. Since it's Agile, Scrum is Agile, the product owner must be able to manage the changing requirements. As requirements are coming, the product owner must be able to manage them. As we go further, and in essence, when we get to practicals, we would see some of those changes that would come and how the product owner should adjust to those changes. We've been able to design the practical in such a way that there would be changes while you are meeting with the stakeholders. There will be requirements changing, and you are also adapting those changes into your pattern, into your workflow also. So that would give you that practical knowledge of how to manage those changes. Then number 4, it's important that the product owner is product savvy. I'll take some time here to explain that. The product owner is important. It's important for the product owner to have product knowledge. You should have good knowledge about the product. You should have the clear understanding to communicate with the stakeholders. So what product for the product owner to be product savvy, what it's important for the product owner to focus on is to be able to communicate effectively with the stakeholders, to understand what the stakeholders want. Is able to now liaise between the stakeholder, the business stakeholder, and the development team. On the other hand, your product savvy should translate to your ability or capacity as a product owner to prioritize the backlog. You should know which one comes first. The knowledge of the product should be able to guide you to prioritize which feature should come first. In addition to that, a product owner must be decisive and also be able to interpret feedback from the stakeholder, feedback also sometimes from the market, feedback also from the developers, and be able to harmonize all those. All this would cumulate into what it means by the product owner to be product savvy. He must be able to be adaptive. I mentioned that earlier. And he must be able to have good insight and direction for the team. The product owner must be able to communicate the products to be developed across to the team members also. In addition, the product owner should have good knowledge of background grooming. We've looked at background grooming in module 2. If you need to go over what that is, that's backlog requirements, you should do that. We'll take some time in this module also to look again at what background grooming, backlog grooming, is all about. In addition, the product owner should have the vision, capacity to envision, and plan. The product owner should be able to tell when this feature would be delivered. And that is where estimation comes to play. As we go further, we'll be looking at all those in greater detail. The product owner also should have the ability to deliver value. Ultimately, imagine you gave work to someone, and at the end of the day, the person comes back with tons and tons of excuses why that particular product could not be delivered. The product owner should be able to deliver actual value, and I've always mentioned that the meaning of value should be what the end user wants, should be what the stakeholders had clearly called value. Mention again, must be decisive in making decisions. Okay, then the next. So what are some of the responsibilities of the product owner? Please make all your notes. If you have gray areas, we can talk about them. We have a lot of grounds to cover under the product owner. So I would, as much as possible, take time to go through them, explain them, so that you can have the good knowledge. Um, we would also rely on the practicals for demonstrations so that you can reinforce the knowledge you have. So responsibility of the product owners is one, to the stakeholders in an engagement, in communication, dealing with stakeholders and all the rest, in ideation and requirements gathering. When the product owner is engaging with the stakeholder, a product owner is responsible for gathering the requirements, because the requirements will turn into specifications that would be populated into the product backlog. So a product owner must be able to gather requirements from the stakeholders. Of course, we've mentioned earlier that he owns the product on behalf of the stakeholders, is representing the stakeholders. So he owns the product, he owns the product backlog, is representing the stakeholders. Is representing the stakeholder on the team. We know that already. What should I do to this pen? Is also representing the stakeholder on the team. Of course, we know that from the last module. It populates and refines the product backlog. The requirements that are being gathered would then be translated into items that would go into the product backlog, and it populates the product backlog. It builds the product backlog and it refines that in backlog. Refining is making alignments, which of course I believe we know by now, and that is why we make mention of backlog refinement meetings to align the product backlog. Then of course the product owner is committed to delivering the product goal. It needs to ensure clarity on the product and is ultimately responsible for the product success. I don't know what it is with this pen today. Okay, but let's make do with what we have. All right, so those are the responsibilities of the product owner at different points. So while you are relating as the product owner, you should be relating and communicating your capacities as regards dealings with the stakeholders and dealings with the development team also, or with your your scrum team also. All right, so let's go to the next slide. What the product owner owns and is accountable for. We'll be quick with this. This is the product vision. The product vision comes from business or stakeholders. Let's say, for instance, a particular organization where you belong, work, I just identified a problem in the society and had been able to think through a solution for it. That solution for that problem becomes the product vision. So that product vision would get broken into epics. Epics are smaller bits of the product vision. What would make up the product vision? That would be the epic. Different layers coming together that would form the vision being achieved. That would be the epics. And the epic also is broken down into features. Features are broken down into user stories. User stories are broken down into tasks. The product owner would have good knowledge of this, having clear understanding what the vision of that project or product is. Now breaking the big vision into smaller chunks and building functionalities from those smaller chunks. Creating user stories from the features. User story, when we go further, we will see how the user story is created, the elements of the user stories, and also now breaking the user stories down into little components. So we'll see how product is developed in Agile. On this class, we're looking at Scrum. So this could form a particular some pieces of work to be done that would be translated into the sprint backlog, right? So we could see how the product vision is broken into smaller bits. All these tasks put together would form the product vision. These pieces of task, when completed, will translate to the product vision being achieved. And that is clearly how Scrum works. So the product owner has a compelling product vision that is executable. He or she builds a roadmap for rolling out the vision that aligns everyone. He owns or she owns the release plan to track the release of the value to the customer. As we go further, we'll begin to have all this in clearer picture. What the release plan is, how do we release them to the market. A particular business could decide that they want to work on a particular project first before going into others. Let me use this as an illustration for us. You are to build an estate comprising of 25 different forms of buildings, from terrace to semi-detached or fully detached or bungalow. All in all, you have about 25 of them. However, you could decide that which is most important based on the timeline, based on the delivery, based on the quickness to get to the markets, based on the need of the society. So you could decide that, okay, guys, let's build the infrastructure first before we begin to build the buildings themselves. Or you could decide, let's do the first layer of the infrastructure, then we go over to building the buildings. You could actually have the buildings completed while the road network had not been fully completed. So in that illustration, your release plan and the roadmap would indicate that the buildings would go into full development ahead of the road network. So that is what we mean by the roadmap itself, how the entire project will be delivered, and in different phases how they would be delivered, then also the release plan. So the product owner also owns and builds the product backlog, we know that already, of enabling items that are just enough and just in time. These two phrases, just enough and just in time, come from a framework we call Kanban. Just enough. So the product owner should ensure, what this means is that the product owner should ensure that your team, the Scrum team, has enough work items per time. There should be just enough and just in time. Ideally, there should be no time your developers has nothing to work on. So it is very important that the product owner has enough work for the team time. The work should be enough. The work should last the time committed to by the team. And also the product owner is accountable for the value delivered to the stakeholders. We know that already. We just see all this coming back from different angles from time to time. Okay, I'll just go through this quickly. Some of this we have mentioned earlier. The product owner optimizes the value of the teamwork. The product owner orders the product backlog. In ordering the product backlog, we mean prioritization. The product owner represents the desire of the stakeholders and also gives clarity to the product backlog items and stay decisive. The product owner must be able to give clarity to the developers what they need to do or work on from time to time. So that will bring us to the end of this first class in module 3 class 1 of the product owner training, where we've been able to expand on who the product owner is. We've been able to look at what the product owner does clearly, how the product owner serves both the stakeholders and the developers, what the product owner is accountable and responsible for, and how the product owner gets work done. We shall go further from this to look in the next class, that will be module 3 lesson 2. We shall now quickly go through what the product owner does in the sprint. So we'll see you again in the next class. Bye for now.